I guess it's recording. So, hi, I'm Heimo. You're at the journey from a module from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 talk. So we're basically just, the idea is we have a Drupal 7 module and have to convert it to Drupal 8. But let's get the first things out of the way first. So that's me. My name is Heimo Fese. And the nice thing about having a name that nobody can pronounce or know how to spell is that you can get your first name on all the social media networks. So on Twitter, on Drupal, I'm just my first name. So, and same with email at the Brick Factory. So that's where I work. The Brick Factory is we are headquartered in Washington, D.C. We're a digital agency, full stack, everything from initial project discovery to design, implementation, and everything that comes afterwards. So, as I said, headquartered in Washington, D.C. Majority of our development force is distributed, as most companies are these days. So, me personally, I live and work from Michigan. So, regarding the agenda of what we're doing, so as I said, the first thing is the module. So, we're looking at a module that has an official release at Drupal.org. And yeah, just first see what it does on D7 and then look at tools and resources we can use to convert it from D7 to D8. And yeah, and then just look at some actual specific steps that we had to take for the module to convert it from D7 to D8. So let's start with the first part, the module itself. So it's called Helpfulness. So please don't yell at me that it is a name that does not make sense and is horrible and so on. It's a module that I wrote while I worked for a big university in Michigan, located in Ann Arbor. We needed for our website there, and we did some, I guess, crowdsourcing to get a name for it. So I guess I'm just glad I'm not stuck with, what was it called, Bodie McBoatface? Or so Helpfulness, I guess, is better. That's the URL for it. It's on Drupal.org, has an official release there. And what it does is it gives users a little form to just say, to gather feedback. So to say if the page was helpful or not, to write a little bit of comments in there, and then it gets stored, and then the system can do some things afterwards. So of course there are 100 different ways to do something like this, but at the time that was just a module that we needed at the university. So I implemented it. And I actually think that this module is really useful for the talk that we have here today, for converting D7 to D8, because it's actually really, really simple. And simple in the sense of that it does not have any really complicated business logic. So if you look at code and you like the code where you have a comment and it says, now comes the tricky part, and the next 500 lines are recursive calls of functions from nested for loops and all that kind of stuff. There's nothing like this in there. It's very little actual code to do fancy stuff. So that's why I think it's actually really good for this, because there's nothing really confusing in there. On the other hand, it does a lot of things. It does a lot of the very basic things that a module might do in Drupal. So it uses permissions. It uses links and tasks. It creates tabs for things. It uses libraries to use style sheets, and it has some configuration that we have to maintain and store and recall. So a lot of those things are things that you need in a lot of modules. So it just so happens that it's the one that I had to write in the past, but it's also, I think, it's very useful for what we are looking at here today. As I said, it has an official release on Drupal.org. That's the URL, Drupal.org project Helpfulness. And I will use those two sources that are here, that are indicated here. So for Drupal 7, there's an alpha release. There's just a little bit additional functionality between the stable release and the alpha release. And hey, if we do live coding, why not use an alpha release just to make it a bit more exciting? And in addition, we have kind of questionable internet, so we never know what actually happens. And yeah, and also for Drupal 8, there's a release candidate now that Yeah. So let's do a demo. Let's see what the module actually does. So I have a D7 site, a very extremely plain, right out of the box site, D7, and I have nothing installed on it. The only thing that I have installed is, if you look at find the way in a default Drupal site without any admin toolbar stuff and so on is really difficult. So Helpfulness, the Alpha 3 release, as I said, is the only module that is installed here, and I have it enabled. So let's first see what it does. As I said, it creates a form that we can use as a block. So if you go to Structure, Blocks, then hopefully we have a Helpfulness block that is so far just disabled because we just only installed it. And let's put it in, let's say the second sidebar and save it. So if we will go back to the site, here it is now. So as I said, the idea was to have a very simple form to just gather feedback from the user. So was this helpful? Yes, no. And then, it does fancy stuff. It even slides down. And if you change the radio button, it even can change the text that is on there. And was this page helpful? No. Let's see. Could use some more content. Yeah, let's try to type when people are watching here. Even if it's Wednesday afternoon, right? Last day of the conference. So, little thing that we gathered the feedback. Okay, that's great. So, what happened now? So, multiple things. The first thing is, under reports, we have another report called Helpfulness Feedback Messages. And that just shows, in our case, the only message that we have submitted so far. So it's new feedback that we have here. We said no, and yeah, just some information about that. We can move it around a little bit, so we can say that this one, okay, we know about this one now, and we put it into our archive, and then just moves it into the other table. And if we have enough feedback messages, it also does tabs and all that good stuff. And an additional thing, what we can do is there's a download here, and we can say which ones we want, and then download all those messages as a CSV file. So the download, and if we open that, then you can see it's just a normal CSV file that has the feedback the user gave itself and some other information like the URL where they gave it from, the client, and all those kinds of things. So this is how we can get it. What we have in addition, we look at the module again. We have some normal permissions for it. And Helpfulness, who is allowed to submit feedback, who is allowed to view the messages, and who is allowed to administer this block that we put in there. So in addition, under configuration, there's a Helpfulness block thing, and there's a subject. There's, if you remember, yes, no, it kind of showed different texts here. So we can customize that, we can put that in there, and for yes, for no. It can send emails out. Whenever a user submits a feedback message, it can send an email. So if you would put an email in here, it would send it out. We don't have an email address, just nothing happens. And in the report options, the table that shows those reports, you can just say what kind of information we want to see there. So it can be not just the name, but also the time and the browser the client used and all those kinds of things. So just a quick overview of how the sources actually look like. So we have a normal info file like everybody would expect for any Drupal 7 module. Yeah, nothing special here. The module file has in D7, of course, all the good stuff in it. So the help, the block info, so that we actually have a block, the hook permissions to define the permissions we just saw, the hook menu, so all the menu stuff we just saw, right? It's all kind of the normal D7 stuff. Block view, so we can actually see the block that we created. The form, a validation, so the only validation we do is that they actually have to click yes, no before they can submit our feedback. The submission itself, there we actually have a little bit of work because we are storing the feedback in the database. So here we're kind of getting all the information from the comments and the user client and all those things. And lastly, the email we just talked about. So if there's an email, then we send a Drupal mail out with wherever it's supposed to go. And hook mail to actually send the email. And lastly, in D7, I still have the Molom hooks in there. So as we know, or as you might know, Molom nears end of life. It's like Monty Python, it's almost dead. I think right now you can still use the free version, but I think it's not really supported anymore, and it's next spring, April or so, Molom is really dead, and then you have to use something different. Otherwise, it's really pretty standard stuff. In the install, we just have hook schema to install to create the database where we store all the data, and in uninstall to delete all our default variables that we have. The JS and the CSS, also nothing fancy in here. It's only to provide this little sliding up and down with the yes, no buttons. There's nothing else in here otherwise. So everything fairly basic, right? There's nothing super exciting, nothing super complicated in there. It's just hooking all the links up and so on. So that's the module. So now we want to convert it to Drupal 8. And the probably most important and nicest resource that we have for that is, in my opinion, the Drupal module upgrader. That's quite a mouthful. It's quite a long word. But it's a really useful tool for that. So what does it do? It's a Drush script that you can install. And what it does is two things. The first thing is that it can try to analyze your Drupal 7 module and give you a report of what you need to do to upgrade it as thorough as possible. And the second thing is that the Drush script can actually try to just, by a lot of magic, convert your Drupal 7 module to Drupal 8 as good as possible. So what do you need to do to actually use it? The main thing is you need a Drupal 8 site. Can be best is just a normal blank Drupal 8 site with nothing in it. And the basic ideas, or the fancy thing, is that you have to install your Drupal 7 module into the Drupal 8 site and then try to work with that. So first thing to install the module is just go to the root of your Drupal 8 site. Then with Drush, download the Drupal module upgrader. And I will try to type that in a minute without making too many mistakes. Looking forward to that. Then you go into the module itself, and you have to do a composer install because it has a lot of dependencies that it needs to download and install, and we'll install all of that into modules itself, and then we can enable it. At that point, we should be able to just use it. And to use it, for the first step would be to do a drush command, drush dmu analyze, and the name of the module that we want to convert. And what it does is it does not really change your sources at that point. All it does is it creates an upgrade-info HTML in the sources of your Drupal 7 module, and that should have some information about what you need to do. So, and by the way, I have not uploaded those slides yet, but I will do it directly after this talk now. Okay, so let's try to actually do that with our module. So I have a plain blank Drupal 8 site which is fancy enough called Drupal Module Upgrader, just to make it confusing. And if you look at that, so kind of looks like a normal Drupal 8 site, right? So we open that up. So if you look, okay, the tree is pretty small, but it's just a normal blank Drupal 8 site with nothing really in it. And the main thing is, under modules also there's nothing in here so far. Okay, so let's try to do what we just said. So drush, download. And right now, at least for me, the full version, the full released version from Drupal Module Upgrader, it's not working for me. It throws a couple of errors with the dependencies in the composer, but the dev version works. So we're doing live coding anyway with alpha or sources, so let's do a dev version as well, just to make it really exciting. So, and in theory, as we know, that should take only a fraction, but with our internet here, there you go. Okay, so I downloaded it. As we said, now we go into the module folder itself, right? So it installed it in module, and now comes the really interesting part, the composer install. Composer, okay. And if we're lucky, it doesn't blow up and it installs everything. Okay, so now we have that. Now, as I said, we need to download and install our Drupal 7 module. So we have a Drupal 8 website, but we need to install our Drupal 7 module. So drush download Helpfulness, and as I said, we're using the latest alpha here. And the main difference just between the full release and the alpha release is this downloading of a CSV file. That's the only difference really between those two. Yay, okay. And now, as I said, what we can do is drush DMU analyze helpfulness. And as we said earlier, hopefully it just runs through the module now and analyzes the sources and tries to create this You can't enable it. Oh, enable Drupal module upgrader. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, you can't upgrade the helpfulness yet because it's a D7 and a D8 installed, but yeah. And it should index it now, okay. And it says it generated our report. So let's look at that. So we go into the folder of our module, and let's open it up in the editor. So it's still just our normal D7 module, but there's this extra thing called upgrade info HTML. So if I open that in the browser, it gives you a nice list of things that the module thinks you need to change for the for this D7 module to work in D8. So let's look at the first part. Blocks are now plugins. Okay, what does that mean? You're new to D8, you don't know what the hell it means. So two things. One thing is documentation. So here are a couple of links that you can look at. So blocks are now plugins. So what does that mean? Okay. We go to Drupal.org, kind of a summary, Drupal 7, it kind of explains what we have to change, changes to the API, and then because nobody wants to actually read documentation, right? There are the examples of stuff that we want to change. So there's a Drupal 7 for a typical hook block info, and then how it looks like in the 8. And then a couple of other examples also. And why do we care about that? Because what is affected is in the module, the line 32. So into the module file, line 32. So that's just our hook block info. So what else do we have? Just hook menu, for example. Okay, hook menu got removed from Drupal 8. Affected is module line 67. So line 67, that's just our hook menu. So just the normal hook menu where we do all the menu stuff. And all functionality of hook menu got replaced with a link to what we actually need to do. The internet is finally giving out. So also you can read about what you need to change. So in Drupal 7 we had hook menu. In Drupal 8 basically it all changed to a bunch of YAML files. We have a routing YAML as it says here, and links.menu.yaml files and so on. So we can read through all of that and learn about what we need to change, right? So that's, and yeah, like this you can, if it's Thanksgiving and you don't want to talk to your family, do that, read through the documentation, you're doing work, so it's good. Some of the things are just warnings, but yeah, so it gives you a good, nice overview of what we need to do. Why is my phone beeping? Probably somebody telling me I should switch my phone off. Okay, so let's go back to our screen. So we did the analyze thing, and we got this the report of what we actually need to change, or what the module thinks we should change. Other things that we can look at is Drupal.org has a whole list of the changes that are in Drupal, and this is for all of Drupal, but if you do filtered by those keywords, so things that went into the branch 8, then you get a list of only things that change in Drupal 8. So this is another one that you can go to and just look through and see what you have to change. Something else that I found really useful in learning what I need to convert is Symfony. So a lot of components from Symfony got adopted into Drupal 8. The whole routing menu stuff, for example, if you write a basic Symfony application, then you have to do that. I was lucky enough in my former job that I had to write a Symfony app, so I kind of got the learning for free. But it's actually, and the exciting and unusual thing about Symfony is they actually have documentation, and it's actually documentation that is good. So at least I thought so. And so it walks you through a bunch of little kind of example applications where you can learn a lot about kind of a lot of the basic structures of the things that you have to change. And then lastly, of course, Drupal.org just has a site also and documentation of what you have to change. So converting Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, that's exactly what you want to do, so you can read through that. Okay. So as I said, this module that we were looking at, it can do two things. It can create this report to tell us what we need to change, but it can also actually try to do the changes for us. And for that, we use Drush DMU upgrade instead of DMU analyze, and then it will actually go through and try to do the change. So let's try that. So instead of DMU analyze, you do DMU upgrade. And this gives a little warning, that's normal. So let's see what we have in here now. So it created a whole bunch of code. It did a lot of things. You know, D7 was just those few pages, few sources. Now it has a whole lot more. So it created a lot of code. Let's look at some basic things. So info.yaml, same as in D7, we need a info file. Only now it's a YAML file. So why is that empty? Okay, that's not normal. Okay, it did stuff in the module file. I don't know why it didn't only create the YAML file without putting the content in there. But if you look at the module file, for example, it did a whole little comments in there and did a bunch of changes. So one of them is this fix me. So you can read through that. The basic thing is that the whole way settings are handled now has changed, and that we have to address and create settings in a different way. And another one is, let's see, for example, I think the Drupal mail has changed significantly. So it just commented the entire Drupal mail call out and tells us that we have to work on that. It also created a lot of code for us. So one of the main things is here in the sources form. For example, the admin form itself. I don't know why I didn't create this one. Okay. So it looked at the form render area that we had for the Drupal 7 module, and now we're putting this into the D8. So it has to be a class that extends form base. The main thing is that it needs to get form ID to get the ID of it, and then we have a function to build the form, and afterwards to submit the form. So it did a lot of things to try to convert as much as possible and give us a starting point. The issue is that it's, of course, far from perfect. One of the big things is it did not remove any of the code that we didn't need. So, again, usually the info YAML file has some conversion in there, but the fact is we don't need a .info file anymore, right? That was just D7. We don't need anything in D8. Then if we go back to the module, we still have a block info in here. As we just saw in this analyze report, block infos are now plugins. We don't even need a block info anymore. So when you do that, when you convert your D7 to D8 with the DMU upgrade command, be careful, or don't expect to have just magically a module that is in its final state and you can use it. It's a starting point to start converting it. And if you enable the module and start to work on it, then you will have to make some changes and remove code that is not needed anymore. And but at least usually, so if the info YAML would be there, you could at least go into the site, enable the module, and then it probably crashes. Most likely it will, but at least a crashing module is better than no module. And just work on it and just work your way through the code and try to get those things done. So we tried our upgrade, and the Drupal 7 thing after our DMU upgrade looked something like this. So a lot of files, and as I just said, a lot of sources that are really not needed anymore and that you can remove. So what do? Just clean the stuff up. Enable it, go through all the comments and remove the stuff you don't need and go through it. When we're done with that, we end up with something like this. This is the cleaned up code. This is the actual working D8 module. So a lot of files, a whole lot more files than we had in D7, but that's just the way it looks in D8. So let's see how the actual cleaned up code looked like, or let's look at how it actually looks like working on D8. So this is again a blank D8 site with nothing installed except this module, the helpfulness module, and it is enabled. So same as before, if we go to structure and the blocks, and let's take the second sidebar again. There's a helpfulness block. So let's save it. And if we go back to our site, hopefully it shows up. So same as in the D7 site. And between yes and no, it still does. I actually saw people just going between yes and no for like 4 or 5 minutes just for this. Have they not used the internet in the last 20 years or 10 years? Anyway, okay, yes, let's see. It's a fancy design what we have here, right? Because we've never seen this outfit before. In the reports, we have, again, the feedback messages. We have the same tables here where we can move it between new and archived, and we can also delete them. We have the same download form. It, again, downloads a CSV file. We have the report options. So in D7, we had those report options in the configuration files. We moved those up here now because I think they just make more sense here. And so in addition to all that, let's say we also want the browser info. And now it also shows us that info in addition in the report. But as we saw, it saves everything in the database, and in the CSV we get all the information. We have the same permissions in there, and under configurations, we also have configurations for that block. And since the report options are not here anymore, we have the yes. So when the yes button is clicked, what is the title? What is the description beneath it? The same for no. And the email options again. If we put an email address in here, then it can send an email when we submit the when somebody submits the feedback. Okay, so quick look at the sources itself. So this is a copy of the D8 sources. So as we said, a whole lot more files than we had before. Some of the basic stuff is the .info file. So it looks very similar to what we had in D8 and D7, but in D8, one of the few differences is that we have now columns here instead of equal signs. We have to say which core it is for, so it's for 8, not 7 anymore, and the configure gives the configure link in the module list. The module file itself looks very different now. Has this definitions just for the status, if they are deleted, if those messages are deleted or not. But the only one that is left in here is the mail hook, or hook mail, to send out the mail. Everything else got removed and lives somewhere else now. So one of the basic normal things is the routings, the links, the menus, all those kinds of things. So to define links and whatever is served when a link is clicked is in a YAML file now. As you can see, most things here are YAML files. The helpfulness routing gives all the links. So for example, the first one here for the form of the reports has the name, helpfulness report form, the path that is actually in the browser bar, the default title, the form that will actually serve up the this link, and the permission that is needed for that. So permissions is also a YAML file. We still have just our 3 permissions. They have a name, they have a title, they have a description, and if you just put that in there, then it will show up in the permissions list and you can use it. The menu uses the routing that we just saw and looked at. So the helpfulness report form uses the route name that we just saw, where it is defined what serves of that route, what the URL is, and so on. So the links, title, description, parent, if they are nested. So if we look at links tasks, all those comments are comments that are made from the module. So the Drupal module upgrader gave all those comments into the files when converted it to try to explain as much as possible what the module did to convert it. So in this case now, those 3 are the 3 tabs that we saw in the report. So the first one was the report, the second one was the downloading of the CSV file, and the third one was the options for the report. So that's what we have here. The report itself with a route and the base route, so it's a tab under that. The report to download the CSV and the options for the report. All the generation of those forms is now in those sources here. So the first thing was the block itself. So the block is a plugin. So we have a plugin block and something called Helpfulness block. And that is actually also still really, really short. It extends block base now. And the only thing that we need in our case is a building of the block and to say where it gets the block from. It's a form that it builds, and it gets it from our module, of course. It's in form helpfulness block form. So we have form corresponding to this here and helpfulness block form. So this is what builds the actual block for this little feedback. We need one specific ID, and then build form to build the form, which is very similar to the render array that we had in D7 to just build all the individual elements. We built the markup for the yes and no. We put it in there. Validation, submission, nothing. Okay, I said no business logic in there, so there's just a little bit to save it in a database and send out the email. The other forms are exactly the same, or this similar idea. So the report form is definitely a bit longer, but it also needs an idea. Then we're building the form, so that, as you can imagine, is a bit longer, since it's those 2 tables with the drop down and so on. So, but it's all just building the columns for the table. There's nothing fancy in here at all. CSS and JavaScript is again just for the little sliding up and down, nothing exciting. The configuration, the installation, is just some default settings. So the default title and description for those, and the default options for our report, if they should show up in the report or not. And schema, kind of definition of what the what our default options are there. And let's see, the only one that still stands out, we still need our table to store the actual feedback messages, and that's still hook schema and looks exactly the same like in D7. It goes through all the just all the data from every feedback message that we're putting in here. Okay, so this is how it looks like after our cleanup. A lot more files, but it's more structured, and yeah. So just very briefly again, the things that we had to do: module information itself, the info file, used to be .info with just name, description, and so on. Now it's a YAML file, so .info.yaml, and it's very similar. It's just instead of equal, it's a column, and we have to say what the core is. That's it. Menus and routing there we have to do a few more changes. So we had hook menu that defined, in this case, the report. So that was located in Helpfulness module. And we had all those, in our D7, we had the report file with all those sources. In D8, we have all that in 2 YAML files. So the routing, where we define the route and the path and the permissions and all that. And then we create the link itself in the link YAML, which just says which route to take or which route to use and where to put it. Permissions also was in module, was hook permissions. And so we defined our permissions in the hook permissions, and then we used them in, for example, hook menu to say which link needs what permission to actually execute. In D8, everything is in YAML files. So again, the permissions YAML to define the permissions, and then in the routing, which permission we need for which route. So it's sort of all the same, just that it's not in hooks and modules anymore, but now it's in YAML files. Forms was just a menu and the form itself to build the form in our module file. And now in the routing, in the routes, we say where our forms are built. In this case, the admin form or the report form. And then we have in the sources a form that has a build form module to build the form and create it. Database table, so Helpfulness install was where we created the database with just hook schema and all the columns that we need in there. And here the nice thing is exactly the same in D8. That's the only thing pretty much that we don't have to change at all. And I think that was it for me. So if I'm not mistaken, then we have 2 more minutes for questions if anybody is still awake on the Wednesday afternoon. Everybody's already waiting for the plane to take off to go back home. I know I have to run to the airport from here, so.
Does the converter make libraries?
Sorry?
Does the converter make libraries for you automatically, or do you have to make the libraries individually?
I think it converts it for you. It creates a libraries YAML file. So in the...
You had it in your final code, but the first one didn't have it, and that was the conversion being broken.
Yeah, so it doesn't do it automatically. You have to do it by hand.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. I'm really scared to push a red button.